Hi, and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for joining me. The show is all about really patting people on the back, reminding individuals and collectively that we share really a miraculous world. And it's easy to lose sight of that because there are so many difficult things that are going on in this day and age. Perhaps you can argue that there always is, but there seem to be worse times and better times. Perhaps this is a worse time. So what I want to do is I want to remind people that we have done some incredible things in our world, not only on our clock, but prior to our clock. And one of the things that I would really like you to take out of the interview that I'm doing today with my very dear and close friend, Ethan Davidson. How are you, Ethan?
Doing great. Thank you. Good to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Nice to see you too. Is that not everybody stays in the zone necessarily that they were born into. And that's a really important piece. Why? Because that means that at some point in your life, despite the fact that you were born into a particular type of culture or environment, that you're prepared to step out of it in order to see that thing or those people whom you feel, soulfully speaking, are right for you. Now, I tell you this because Ethan and I, we've interviewed in the past. It was a wonderful interview. And he has a fascinating background, which we're going to get to in a moment. Just a reminder, the most of this interview or discussion or schmooze, however you call it, will be about biblical characters. And the reason we're doing that is because when Ethan and I interviewed the first time around, very often what happens is I find aspects of my guests that I really hold on to, that I really like. And then I bring them back because I really want to talk about that stuff. So what I like about Ethan is his passion for the Torah, for talking Torah, which I have the same, and also for the biblical characters. But I think the main thing that I'd like you to take out of this interview is that Ethan started in a particular place in life and he moved forward. One could argue he moved away from it. And then I think it's appropriate to say that he stepped back into some of that place where he started out. So his journey has been very Abrahamic. It's very circuitous, but it's very powerful, and he's been very passionate about it. So, Ethan, when I talk about your life up till now, Admei Esrim, until 120, would it be correct that at some point in time you looked at who you were and you said, you know what, I'm going to step out of that?
Yeah, well, I've had, and by the way, speaking of stepping, if any of your listeners, viewers have seen the last one that we did together, or seen me in some other way, they know that I have to keep moving. So, because otherwise they'll catch me. So,
I'm not moving, but I understand what you're saying.
But if I make your viewer, give them motion sickness, that I'm, sorry, there's not much I can do. Just take a little Dramamine, you'll be fine.
provided by the show, Dramamine provided. Yeah,
That's right, exactly. Well, yeah, my life has been, I mean, like everybody, I think has a kind of obviously a unique journey through life. Mine seems like it's been strange. My therapist, who I have, who's out in San Francisco, has told me over the years that she thinks mine is the one of those stranger journeys. And so I think if a therapist in San Francisco who's seen all kinds of different things can say that, then I guess it probably means something. But
great about it.
exactly. Well, so, yeah. I mean, I was born. And this will come back to Abraham and why Abraham is so central a figure for me. I was born I wasn't born Jewish. I was born to a teenage girl um, who was living with her older sister at the time in Weather Underground kind of commune in Lansing, Michigan. And, if your viewers don't remember the Weather Underground, this was a far left Marxist, anti-government uh, terrorist organization, I guess. They bombed the 1968 Democratic National Convention. Um, the interesting thing was is that my biological mom and her sisters, they all did end up marrying Jews because there were a lot of Jews in that scene. But so I guess I would have ended up Jewish some way or another. But then I was adopted into a Jewish family. My biological mother had originally named me Shmuel because she knew that I was going to a Jewish family. Um, the family that raised me, they changed my name to Ethan. And I think the interesting thing about that is Ethan is a nickname for Abraham, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Um, but also my bar mitzvah portion, the portion that comes up usually around the time that I was born, um, was Lech Lecha.
Mhm.
And, and I think that there's, people talk about how, whatever the parsha is at the time you're born, or whatever your bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah portion is, it has, some kind of meaning or impact uh, on who you are, how you develop, and the way that, different parts of your self or your life are sort of actualized. So, being Eitan, Abraham, and also having this portion of Lech Lecha, like go for going, or go to yourself, or by going go, however you want to translate Lech Lecha, which is like kind of grammatically difficult to translate. By having that as my bar mitzvah portion, go to yourself, go for going to that place that I will show you, not any place that's defined as of yet. I think that set me on, I feel like that set me on some kind of path. I don't know whether I'm trying to find meaning out of something that is well, whether I'm just trying to find meaning out of, why this has been my life. I guess that's where I'm trying to find it in the story of Abraham and the command Lech Lecha.
When we talk about adoption, there's a phrase that's commonly used, and it is given up
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
adoption. Is
Mhm.
that an accurate phrase?
I don't know. I think it's yeah, I mean, I've thought about that over the years, I guess. I think that, given up can feel like very it can maybe for most of us our first reaction to that is that can be have a negative connotation.
Yeah.
In the case of my biological mother, she wasn't she was with another guy that she went to high school with. They were not uh, romantically involved in any kind of way. I don't even think she liked him. I don't know how the pregnancy came to be. I never that felt uncomfortable to ask her. So I just, however it came, she got pregnant. She didn't like the guy. And she knew that she couldn't raise me. She did have an older sister who I think, had recommended maybe that she take a different approach to terminate the pregnancy and that. So of course I'm glad that didn't happen. Of course that's a choice that people can make, and that's fine. Um, but she knew that she was just going to be unable to take care of me. So to give up for adoption in this case, um, I gather from talking to her over the last 20-25 years that it was a very difficult choice for a 17-year-old girl to make. And I think she had a lot of unresolved issues around that for a long time, which she's subsequently worked through in the time that we've known each other as adults. But so giving up for her, I think probably meant something quite different than giving up for me. Um, I feel like it was a very positive and a very, righteous and holy thing to do, uh, because she just knew that she wasn't in a position to, to do anything about this. To raise a child at that age. A younger half brother that I have, we share the same mother, also told me, he's 5 years younger than I am, but he told me years ago, his situation growing up was, in his words, sometimes we were climbing into the van and we weren't necessarily going anywhere. They were like living in a van. I mean, I of course did that many years later in my 20s and 30s, but
Yeah, you did.
I didn't have to do that as a small child. And so I count myself as very fortunate, that I ended up where I did, and I count her as very holy and righteous for making the difficult decisions that she had to make at a very young age. So I think the giving up, um, from my standpoint, is positive.
One of the Aseret Dibrot, the Ten Commandments that Moses was given on Sinai, was kibbud avim, which is respecting your
Mm,
mother and your father.
that's right.
Is that inherent? When you started talking to your biological mom, did you find that you were automatically respecting her?
Yeah, I did. I mean, we went through our own difficult times, because, I popped into her life when I was in my early 30s. She was in her, she was like 50, and she really hadn't dealt psychologically with some of this trauma about giving up a child. And I, of course, was not that child. I mean, I am that child in some kind of way, but but I'm a completely different person than the baby that she gave up for adoption. I don't remember that. She, of course, does remember that all too vividly. And so we went through our own difficult times because, she needed the space for many years where we didn't talk, to sort of process having, me back in her life. And I needed to step away from the relationship for several years as well. Um, to so that we could, hopefully circle back as two adults, that could have, you know, uh, a nice relationship, as whatever kind of relationship it is, friends, biological relations, this kind of thing. But we circled back and we have a very nice relationship now. And of course, I've had I've had a couple of different parents over the years, stepmothers, stepfathers, that kind of thing. And many of them have had their own complications. Many of our relationships have been complicated, but I feel like I honor them all in different ways. At least I try to, and whatever difficulties we may have had in the past, um, when we really try to approach each other later on from a place of healing and teshuva in the very most difficult cases. I hope that we try to accept each other in teshuva and in repair and in healing. And I feel like I have good relationships with all of my different parents. I don't have any contact with my biological father. I haven't had contact with him for years, but I've only met him on two or three occasions anyway. So I don't know where he is.
I get a sense, and tell me if I'm correct, that you are enormously loved, that you have huge amounts of love in your life. Is that correct?
I think I do. I think I have some really good friends. I have really good family members. Um, I mean, I also have, it's also sometimes, been difficult over the years. People, it's yeah, I have different kinds of people in my life. Some of them really love me.
Some of them love you, and some of them finish that sentence.
Well, it's like I've had, uh, because of professional basketball and that kind of stuff. My father being a wealthy public figure, I've had stalkers, I've had scary people in my life. I have, It's funny. I have people that hate me now because I'm, I see stuff online. People hate me because I'm Jewish and we do work in Israel. But the interesting thing is, like 30 years ago, when my father was building, factories over in the Arab world, we had people that hated us because we were building factories in the Arab world. So I'm like, well, which one is it? Am I supposed to? Do you think I love the Arabs or hate the Arabs? I mean, it can't be both.
Yeah, right.
You know. And by the way, I don't hate anybody, and I'm not trying to kill anybody. But some people think I'm some kind of bad person. I think because I'm wealthy and Jewish. So,
I
but
had a
I try not to think about it too much.
I had a therapist once who told me that I was so needy that if
Mm.
Hitler didn't like me, it would bother me.
Yeah, right.
Are you good with being loved? Are you good with it?
Yeah, I am. I don't think that I don't think that I always remember that I'm loved, and that I have, sometimes I can, when I see the some of the hate that's directed at the Jewish community or the hate that's directed at me, um I can go into a place where I think, gosh, I don't have friends, or I can go into a dark place with that, or when I think that people, maybe just want to be around me because they perceive me as wealthy or connected or powerful or something, which, I don't feel like I'm powerful in any kind of way. But I think people are hanging around me because of that. I can start to feel lonely and feel like I don't have close relationships, or I wonder who my friends are. So I I need to remember, um, that no, I do have good friends. I do have people that love me. Um, it's just sometimes I can spiral into a place where I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
always, keeping that in mind. But I need to do a better job of that.
No, I'm like that too. It's those spiraling moments late at
Yeah.
night usually when I'm stoned. You know what I mean? I just
Yeah. Yeah.
spiral downwards. It's awful. I treat myself awfully. But does your
Mm.
wife Gretchen, does she love you well?
Yeah, she does for
She knows
sure.
how to love you?
She does. She does. It's a marriages are always a negotiation. It's like you are in love, you are, married together, you're in this intimate relationship, you're also sort of running a business,
Yeah.
and that business is called a family. And so it's a little bit of every kind of relationship that you could have. So you're always, you know, I mean, you know how it is. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of your listeners, if they've been married for a long time, they know it's a negotiation, right? And it's so um but yeah, she definitely loves me.
Do you zone out sometimes? What do you get like when you get like real pissy?
Do I, when I get really see, hopefully I don't get too pissy. Sometimes I can be a little snappy. Yeah. When I just get overwhelmed by it all. And it's not just what happens in the house, but it could be everything happening outside the house. You know how the world piles up on you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the people that see you at your worst are oftentimes the people in your home. Because that's where you kind of let there are things that you say to your very closest loved ones that you would never say to a person on the street. God
Yeah.
forbid.
Absolutely.
And you shouldn't say it to your loved ones either. But we all. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say we all get there. I certainly get there. I can't
No,
speak for
I
anybody
get there too.
else.
I do
Yeah.
too. Ladies and gents, 15 or 10 minutes. How much? We're almost 20 minutes actually into the interview. I want to introduce my guest. His name is Ethan Davidson, and this is our second interview. He's a Toronto-based folk singer songwriter. He's a philanthropist, a writer, and student of Torah, and a creative force with a remarkable story. He boasts 11 albums and performances across North America and Europe. I think at one point you did 900 shows.
That's right.
Yes, which is absolutely incredible. Ethan's music, marked by haunting confessional lyrics and a golden voice, paints vivid scenes of old books, oil lamps, and bohemian journeys connecting the personal to the universal. Beyond the stage, he's a pivotal figure in Detroit's philanthropic community, leading the William Davidson Foundation, established by his late father, God bless his soul, Bill Davidson, former owner of the Detroit Pistons and Tampa Bay Lightning. Ethan's path reflects balance and conviction. I was talking to my buddy David Nefesh, David Middleman, same person who you know as well and you've played
Oh
with.
yeah.
And he told me a very beautiful story that he went to, was it Zados in Detroit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. A
he was
long time ago.
a
Yeah.
long time ago, and you were playing at Zados. And David loves Zados, and he took me there. I've been there. I don't think it exists anymore, right?
No. No.
No. And anyways, he sees an elderly gentleman sitting there. I'm
Mhm.
not sure it was in the front or the back. And he looks at him. He goes, "Oh, that's Bill Davidson. That's your dad."
Yeah.
Now, your
Yeah.
dad was a dad to you. He was a wonderful father, as we
Yeah.
discussed in our first
Sure.
interview. But he was also world renowned
Yeah.
for his
Yeah.
philanthropy, for his ownership of professional sports. And he went over to your father and he said to him, "Hi, Bill. My name is David Middleman or David Nefesh, and it's very nice to meet you." And your father looked at him and he said, "Well, thank you so much. It's lovely to meet you." David's a
Yeah.
very respectful person, and he just let him be. But that
Mhm.
story is a remarkable story because it was this tiny little place, and there you were playing your rock and roll, and your father, who really ostensibly you would think comes from a very different world, he came to be your cheerleader.
Oh yeah. 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 He was, I mean, my father, Bill, was very, he was an unusual guy. He was very, he was extremely low key. He was not, yeah, I mean, look, he owned these sports teams. He built this global manufacturing business, but he was not in any kind of way fancy, flashy. He didn't put on any kind of airs. He was Bill to people. And he used to come to all my shows. It was funny, even when the bands were terrible and I was starting out, and anytime I was coming through Detroit, he would come to the shows. And eventually, as he got older and the shows got a little bigger, um, the bars got bigger and it was punk rock clubs or whatever. At some point, I had to, I said, look, you don't have to come. I mean, first of all, there's not going to be a place for you to sit. By the end, he was not. It was difficult for him to walk and move around, and I'd have to tell him, like, listen, don't come. And he would still he'd still show up at these punk rock clubs when he was 80 years old or something. And of course, by then, he had won some championships, and so he was famous, and people were like, "Oh, there's the owner of the Pistons is over there." Yeah. But he was a funny, very, he wasn't, like I said, he didn't put on any airs. He didn't hold himself in a way, where he felt he was different than he was a person. He was a human being. And
How much
that's how he treated everybody.
how much of you telling him that he didn't have to come to your shows was about you?
Well, I liked that he came out. I knew that he was going to come out, and his sister too. Dorothy, his late sister now, Dorothy Gerson. She was older. She used to come all the time too, and I was just concerned. She was a tiny little old lady, and I was just concerned that it's like these are people that are bouncing around in these clubs, and it's I mean, at some point they banned smoking, so that was probably good for everybody. But I used to worry about I used to worry about their health. And how much of it was about me. I think there was a part of me that as we were talking about earlier and talking about the last time, I had to get away from home. I had to find my own identity. This is the Lech Lecha piece, right? Or this is, to talk about biblical characters. This is, Moses going off into Midian. It's like we have to go out. I wrote about that in my first book a little bit. We have to go out. Um, uh, Acharei Hamidbar, as it says regarding Moses, to go sort of beyond or behind the wilderness, and it's there that we can really begin to discover who we are and create
Yeah.
our own identities. And so, yeah, there is a part of it that was um, I needed to get out of Detroit to get out from under his shadow. Not that there was anything wrong with him, but I needed to get out and figure out who I was. And then, yeah, there were times when I would come back through Detroit on tour where, of course, I would see him at his home or see him at the Pistons practice facility. But I did want to have my own, thing separate from him. I was always very honored that he came to the shows. Uh, and I was also very much concerned for his well-being. You know?
Right, right. I also know when you're up on stage, you could be dancing and prancing around in
Yeah.
a way which perhaps our parents wouldn't be that comfortable with, you know?
Well, yeah,
Was
for
there an
sure.
aspect of that too? Could you let loose when he was there?
Well, he'd seen me in a lot of different contexts growing up and trying on a lot of different identities when I was growing up. So, yeah, there's a part of me that's still self-conscious about um, what I might represent, because especially here in Detroit, because I am, Bill Davidson's son, or whatever that might mean to people. Um, and I'm still self-conscious about him. Of course, I don't want to do anything that's going to embarrass him, or his memory. And on the other hand, though, he did see me as I was growing up, experimenting with a lot of different identities and personas and that. So, and he was always very, kind of nonchalant about that. I mean, I wasn't into drugs. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't engaging in any kind of criminal behavior. And I think as long as I was doing that, he was pretty hands off and pretty understanding that I was, figuring out my own kind of thing. He was not really, but yeah, he saw a lot of different sorts of things.
Yeah, you're an interesting fellow because parts of your life I really identify with. I struggled for a long time with who
Mm,
I was and the various
yeah.
different components of my personality until eventually what happens, and this is what happens as you get older, is you decompartmentalize and all those
Yeah,
pieces come together.
that's
Right.
right.
So for instance, when you go to the Bill Davidson Foundation board meetings as an
Mhm.
example,
Yeah,
are you now completely comfortable with your own payas, with the way
yeah,
you represent yourself? And when other people look at you, people don't know you well, and they're kind of in wonderment of your payas. It is
yeah.
you, are you cool with that?
I'm cool, totally cool with that. I mean, and and I wear tzitzit. I wear my tzitzit,
Yeah.
out, and people see that, and it's, and then people ask me if I'm Orthodox or something, and I'm like, well, I'm not. I don't subscribe to any movement. I mean, I go to any shul or any part of the community, whether it's ultra Orthodox or totally Reformed, and I want to express myself Jewishly this way. People again that have known me for a long time know that I've tried on all kinds of different looks, and I am who I am. I mean, it's like, I remember a couple of months ago, in my capacity as the chairman of the Detroit Opera, a reporter from the New York Times came out to interview me and to interview some of the staff just about what we were doing at Detroit Opera. And this was a woman who had been reporting on arts and culture for the New York Times for decades. And and I'm not bragging with saying this. I'm just saying that this is what she said. She said, "Oh, you don't look like any opera chair that I've ever seen before." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, it's like they wanted to think outside of the box, and so they thought, let's have the next chair be a rabbi." So
Yeah,
that's
right.
how they,
Let's
how
go
they ended up
clergy.
with
Here's a
me.
good idea. Yeah, yeah.
Right? We
But
haven't
are
we
you
haven't
are
done
you
that. Yeah.
are you good those look, I started and ran an organization and I
Yeah.
know what boards are and I know
Yeah.
what formal boards are and I know what Jewish boards are and
Mhm.
they can get highly sophisticated and very
Sure.
formal. That's not really me when I'm not there. But when I'm
Right.
sitting in front of a board, I can take on that persona and I can adapt like a chameleon. Can you adapt well to that?
I think so, although I will say this, that, my at the Davidson Foundation, um, because it's a small family board, and particularly the part of the family board that really are my older cousins that worked for my father. Um, we have a very informal family as it is, in a way. I mean, they're certainly more conservative dressers than I am, or more conservative in their presentation, but we're just not a family that really rested on a lot of formality. And so and of course, these are my older cousins, so I grew up with them. They might think that they might think that my life is a little strange, my life is a little odd or whatever. But you know what, we all trust each other, and I think we work pretty well together. And even where we might disagree on a given grant or a given direction, it's always collegial, and without formality. When I went to the opera house, it was interesting because there it's a board of 40, 45 people, many of whom I really didn't know all that well. And I tried to approach that board with the same level of informality, and but they wanted to be very, much more parliamentarian about things over
Yeah.
there. So I did have to, sort of, I did have to adjust, my approach there. But I try to be a little, loose about things even there where I can be. Uh,
Ethan, what's exciting about your payas?
what's exciting about my
Yeah,
past?
what's exciting about it? Yeah.
Well, I so it's like this. There's a couple things about Payas, and that, what part of my life is, um I was briefly a farmer in northern Michigan, like 30 years ago. And I always felt like if I ever end up parked again somewhere, not on the road, that I would farm. And so we have, now that I've been living here in Birmingham, Michigan for 15 years or something. We have a little farm here. We grow a lot of our own food. And I wanted to bring in, this comes back to Payas, I wanted to bring in, uh, Jewish agricultural practices, halachic agricultural practices, even if they're not necessarily applicable here outside of the land of Israel. But I thought it's a good opportunity to do some of these things, in that I can talk with other people, Jewish or non-Jewish, about our agricultural practices. And one of those things is to leave the corners of your field unharvested for the poor. And that's called paya, right? Or in the plural, payot or payos. It's the same word as the corners of your head. We don't have we don't have we don't have poor and hungry people walking past this part of Birmingham, so there's not people coming in and collecting food from us, but we give that food away to friends and stuff like that. And so we leave, the corner of the field is not, just for us. Similarly with the payas of the head, I figured this is an easy mitzvah for me to perform. Just like wearing tzitzit is an easy mitzvah for me to perform. Um, People already think I'm strange anyway, so it's not going to freak them out that I have payas.
Yeah.
And so I can do this mitzvah. It's easy for me. It's easy for all of us, and I'm not self-conscious about it. And it also signals to people that I'm Jewish. I was out west, uh, last January. I was skiing out west, and I was going into a coffee shop, and I heard behind me these guys say, "Hey, that guy's got payas," and the other guy's like, "No, no, that's not payas." And then the other one said, "No, look, he's got tzitzit."
Yeah.
So I turned around, introduced myself. They were like two young guys from New York that were also out there skiing, and they said, "Why? What are you doing with this?" And I said, "I'm doing this because I wanted to meet you." You know,
Yeah, good response.
two
All
Jewish
right.
guys from New York. Yeah, so
Very
that's
good.
yeah, that's it,
Is
man.
is it easy to shampoo?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, yeah, it's
I've
fine.
seen the
Yeah,
Hasidic guys. I used to go to the mikvah when I was in yeshiva,
yeah,
spiritual baths, and I would see these Hasidic guys who had tremendously long payas down to their waist,
yeah,
and
right.
then you would see them in the mikvah and later showering, and they would unravel, and they were magnificent,
Oh yeah, for sure, for
right? They're
sure,
just gorgeous.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure,
So I
absolutely.
want to take us on a bit of a road here in the next half
Yeah,
of our interview. We
right.
talked about riffing on some of the biblical characters, which you and I quite enjoy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I learn Parsha every week, and I teach a share called Parsha and Prose with my
Mhm.
dear friend Rabbi Shlomo Gemara. And what we do, Ethan, is we compare the Parsha to classic literature
Mm,
and try to bring out the salient pieces of the Parsha through great literature like
mm.
Catcher in the Rye, as an example.
Sure, sure.
So I fall in love with biblical characters, and to the extent that when Moses dies, I go into a very, very short period of mourning. I
Yeah,
truly do,
yeah.
because as you learn Torah week by week by week by week, you start to learn more about the character. But not only do you do that, you see yourself within that character very often,
Right.
and you see aspects of that man as Moses or Abraham, Sarah, a
Yeah,
beautiful woman, the wife of Abraham. You see aspects of them which you quite love, and
yeah,
therefore often falling in love with them. So
for
let's
sure.
start with Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah.
Do you have a strong feeling for the couple?
I do, I do have a strong feeling as I mentioned earlier for Abraham, I identify with him, because of his journey and because that was my bar mitzvah portion.
Yeah.
That, in some ways I'm named after him, being Eitan. Um, and it's interesting to me. I've thought about this a lot. My name in Hebrew, Eitan, being a um, being a nickname, so to speak, for Abraham. And Abraham, about this, he starts out on this journey away from home, and he doesn't know where he's going. God just tells him to a land that I will show you. So he's moving forward, right? And one of the things that I think about the name Eitan is if you think about the letters, Aleph, Yud, Taf, Nun, uh, those are the letters, those are the four letters that signify the future tense in Hebrew verbs.
Mhm.
Those, if you conjugate something into the future tense, those are the letters that always come to the beginning of this or that. Those are the only four. And they spell that name Eitan. So I think about Eitan, my Hebrew name, Abraham's Hebrew name, and this journey as always. Um, it's a forward journey to some future that we don't know, and that we don't have. That we have to trust that God is going to bring us to that land, whatever that land is, right? And so that's my drash on Aton, on the journey, on Aton, representing Avraham in that way. It's um it's a forward journey to an unknown, undefined country, undefined future. Um,
It's interesting that you speak about your Hebrew name because there's a lot of discussion around Hebrew names. My name is Avraham Yitzchak,
nice,
and
nice.
I feel as though God gave me that name.
Yeah, right,
Do you feel that
right.
way about Eitan?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's interesting because, as I mentioned at the beginning, my biological mother originally named me Shmuel, which is a completely different thing, and
Yes.
I don't really relate to it as much,
Yeah.
right? But because I never lived with that name, but it's and then I was renamed as Eitan Daniel, but it's yeah. I mean, I definitely relate to it, and I do think it's like, as I reflect back on the life I've had, especially the parts of my life where I was on the road for so long, I'm like, oh, it makes perfect sense that Lech Lecha was my bar mitzvah portion. It makes perfect sense that my name is eton, which is about this forward motion, future motion.
So in that light, I want to read you just a couple of lines from a midrash.
Sure.
How would you define midrashim?
Somebody put it this way to me a long time ago: rabbinic fan fiction.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah,
a
no,
really
I like
good
that.
one. That's like when the people write those, when fans write their own books about Star Trek or Star Wars or something like that. But the difference is, I think, with midrash, there is something divinely inspired about it for sure. I mean, it's definitely unpacking truths in midrash. We
So do
can't understand text without it. They're very useful tools.
you believe in nevuah and prophecy?
I do. I believe in some kind of prophecy, inspiration, whatever there is, look, and then you'll get to the midrash. But in a nutshell, and I think we talked about this a little bit the last time. I mean, I really think about the texts, including for sure midrash, as a psychotherapeutic tool that helps us to unpack what's going on inside of ourselves. We use these texts as a sort of a mirror to see what's happening inside of ourselves. Obviously, the rabbis who composed midrash were doing the same thing.
Yes.
That's why we have the midrashim that we have, and I do think that all taps into some kind of nevuah. Yeah.
Have you had nevuah on stage?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes songs or the rabbinic writing that I do, insights in the text, they seem to come from a different place. Whether I want to say that's nevuah really, or if that's just coming from some kind of deep place within my, a deep well within my psyche, I don't know. But it's like, and I think that we all can tap into that. But I think that if we really wrestle with this stuff, I think the insights come from some deep place or some other place, some subconscious place. I don't know, you know.
The reason I ask you that is because there's a school of thought that there was a prophet school, and
Mm,
there
yeah,
were hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of prophets. The good ones really rose to the top,
sure.
know.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
there were just a bunch of prophets running around. And when I think about music, when I think about writing, when I think about poems and the poets and the lyricists, I think,
Yeah,
oh, okay, maybe there's an aspect of that person's soul,
for
like
sure.
yours,
Yeah.
where prophecy comes through the
Mm,
song. So the midrash that I want to read you, the midrash recounts that Abraham, even as a young child, recognized the futility of idol worship. The midrash says that he was observing the stars and the moon and the sun, and he initially thought, well, each might be the supreme deity. That would have been an obvious thought in those days.
sure, sure.
But when they set or were obscured, he realized they were not eternal. He concluded there must be one creator who
Mm,
governs all. This
yeah.
showcases Abraham's intellectual curiosity and spiritual independence, setting the stage for his covenant with God. Just curious, have you always believed in God?
I have, yeah, I have. It's and I think it, comes from going to a Jewish day school early on. Um, yeah, I took that stuff seriously, and I did always believe in God. I can't think of a time where I didn't, to be honest.
And do you philosophize? Have you always done that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, and I've always tried to poke against whatever assumptions or beliefs that I have. I can't get to a place where there's no God. I think that I've honestly tried to do that, to get to that place, but I can't get there, and I can't get to a place where a couple of the things that come down through our texts about Israel's mission, about the Jewish mission. I can't get to a place where those aren't true either. I find things in the text that I would describe as spooky, and that I have been unable to dismiss or poke holes in. So yeah, I would say that I wouldn't say that I'm the most religious person, but there's definitely things that I've tried to really disprove, and I can't.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The question of the belief in God, I find that really strong believers, people have great amounts of faith. As an example, my mother, God bless her soul. When my father died, Ethan, I said to her, Mom, did you ever question the existence of God? She goes, never. She
Right.
goes, but I was
Right.
seriously angry with God.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, and that, yeah. Yeah, I hear that. You know, I get angry with God.
Yeah, now's a good day. Now's a good time to be angry with God, I think.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, Abraham and Sarah were known for their hospitality, and
Yeah.
their hospitality was shown in very extreme ways. As an example, God comes to visit Abraham after he performed a Brit Milah, a circumcision on himself.
Right.
And all men in the room at this point grab their,
Exactly.
oh, ah.
That's
and,
right.
and and God comes and he visits him, Hachnas
Mhm.
Orchim, which is visiting the sick.
Mhm.
And three men pass by, three strangers, and God says to, or Abraham says to God, "Excuse me for a moment. I want to
You're
go
right.
tend to those strangers."
Amazing.
And it's a magnificent story. And
Yeah.
Sarah joins him in that preparing food for them. And the midrash says that his tent was open on all four sides, so that whether strangers came from the north, came from the south, came from the east, came from the west, they would always have a place to go into.
That's right.
Do
That's right.
you and Gretchen, your wife, do you have a sort of a way about you which is highly hospitable like Abraham and Sarah?
Oh, I think my wife does for sure. You know, she's very much like Sarah in that way. And the house is always welcoming and open, and it's quite often that we have. I mean, she's been um, in the music world, as long as I have, and continues actually at a level professionally that I don't really do anymore. So when people are coming through that she knows, whether it's former members of Sonic Youth or we had recently or whomever, um, they stay at our home, and it's quite remarkable. So it's definitely this welcoming of guests is definitely a principle that she lives by, and I do too. On the other hand, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to be alone.
Yeah, right. Right. I was going to ask. Yes. Yeah,
you know?
I know that feeling.
Yeah, for
I know
sure.
that feeling. I have a
But
friend,
the
Menachem.
interesting. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a friend, Menachem, who set a rule down in his home that no guests on Friday night, only on
Yeah.
Shabbos lunch. So he could
Right.
be with family, right?
Sure. No, sure. Yeah, I mean, and we'll have guests over here for Shabbat, or we'll go to somebody else's house for Shabbat. But I don't go anywhere where it's not Shabbat, a Shabbat meal happening. Like I wouldn't go to a restaurant. I wouldn't go to we got to be doing Shabbat, and I want to make sure that my kids are prioritized, right? Because at some point they'll be off on their own. You know, so those are important times. But I did want to say, like, one thing about the tent open on all sides. Another thing that occurs to me about Abraham and Sarah, when we were first, sort of establishing the William Davidson Foundation after my father died, one of the things that the staff and I talked about in terms of what is it that we are engaged in, from the standpoint of a figure from our text and our tradition, it is this idea of having the door to the Jewish community open on all sides, or the gates, that Nehemiah repaired. He repaired the gates on all sides of the city. And because our idea was that whatever direction Jews are coming from, if they want to, connect with the Jewish community, engage more deeply with their Judaism, they're going to be coming from all kinds of different walks of life. And we have to make sure that the tent is open on all sides, or that the city is open on all sides.
You're so lucky. You are so incredibly
No,
lucky.
I don't
No,
know,
you know
but
why I
thank
say
you.
that? You know why I say
Mm,
that? But I don't have a lot of money.
yeah.
I've never been good with it.
No, me neither.
If you weren't born into wealth, would you have money?
If I were what? Sorry.
If you were not born into wealth, would you have money?
Oh, no, I don't think I ever had a talent for making any kind of money.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So I always try very hard to give tzedakah, to give of
Yeah.
myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I
Mm,
did that through my organization via Hafta. But I always think to myself, if I ever make a lot of money, that I would love more than anything just to give it away.
Yeah.
That's an
Yeah.
exciting thing, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think that my father wasn't a person who was enamored of money either. He very much liked to build things. He liked to build businesses. That's what he was really good at.
Yeah.
He was really good with finding the right, kind of people to be in business with, and he became incredibly successful. But he didn't have a fancy car. He didn't. We had a nice house. It wasn't any kind of mansion. And I mean, later on, at the end of his life, he spoiled himself a little bit more. But that was really the last 3 years of his life. And he was not really. I remember he had a housekeeper who said, your dad doesn't have any rich guy things. I'm going to get him a rich guy thing. I'm going to buy him a Barca lounger. And so she bought him a Barca because he didn't have a reclining chair. So that was to her rich guy thing. And he thought that was great. And he sat in it and watched the football games and the basketball games. But
Very
he didn't.
cool.
And then at the end of his life, what he really wanted to do was leave all of his money to the foundation, which is what he did. I mean, he gave us all a comfortable life. We're fine, thank God. But I work for him, and we give all the money away. That was what he wanted. He wasn't interested in that kind of stuff.
One of the things that we need to look at when it comes to Abraham and Sarah is the almost shechting, slaughtering of his son.
Yeah,
Right? So God says to him, take your son and bring him up to the mountain, and I want you to offer him as a sacrifice. And seemingly it's unbeknownst to Isaac.
yeah,
He walks with his boys, one of whom's Ishmael, and he leaves him at the base of the mountain. And he takes Isaac up and he ties him down as he would a korban, a sacrifice. Then, just about as he is about to kill him, an angel comes along and says, stop,
yeah,
stop it. God doesn't want this.
Mhm.
And there's so much discussion around it as to
Yeah.
how this could possibly be that Abraham, one of the greatest prophets ever, the first Jew, first monotheist, could possibly offer his son child sacrifice, which was anathema to the Torah.
Yeah.
So what's curious to me is when you look at the Akedah, when you look at the offering, almost offering of Isaac, and you look back on yourself, Ethan, have
Mm.
you ever been Abraham in that situation, or have you ever been Yitzchak in that situation?
Well, I want to ask you that because you are Avram Yitzchak. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
interested. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that because, yeah, I do have, yeah.
I mean, I would just tell you in short, because I'm far more interested in you,
Sure.
that I gave up my orthodoxy when I was 20 years old,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that was a chore. My father
Mm.
was an Orthodox rabbi,
Right.
and for all intents and purposes, that was the end of our relationship
Mm-hmm.
until he died when I was 29.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel as though I was being taken up to the Akedah and being offered, not
Sure.
afterwards, but prior,
Sure.
because being Orthodox was not something that was palatable to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I couldn't breathe,
Right. Right.
and I
Right.
might as well have been offered up because it wasn't me. It wasn't my life. I didn't
Exactly.
feel like I was actualizing my essence. How about you?
Well, I get the same kind of thing. I think in the difference is with me and my father, and where I felt, like Yitzchak for sure. I think the one kind of area of disagreement, tension, it wasn't major as it turned out, but my father, I think, really would have preferred, on some level, that I would have grown up to take over his companies, run Guardian Industries. That I had no interest in doing any of that. I felt like I didn't have a talent for that. Um, I mean, I was a very good student in college. I was basically an A-, B+ student, but I failed accounting 3 times. So, and I tried, right? I mean, I tried because I wanted to really try for him. I just could not. That was just my brain didn't work that way. And so we disagreed about that, and I did feel like I can't be stretched out on the rock um, for this kind of stuff. And if that's the way it is, so be it. I mean, I think that he was at times very disappointed in that. But in the end, I think he understood that I was just a different, that we were just different people. And then that was fine. It didn't have any long-term, we had stretches where there was, tension around that. But in the end, he asked me to come back and help out with this foundation. But I did feel as a young person, um, stretched out on the rock, so to speak, in those contexts, around being a successor to him in some kind of way.
Once again, I say you had a lot of muzzle because your father had the wherewithal to
Yeah.
understand who you were.
Yeah.
My father didn't have that understanding.
Well, I hear you. I understand that. I get that. I mean, and I think there were still things we didn't understand about each other. We were definitely different people, but I think he sort of accepted it, and it was fine. I mean, I think that he, uh, um, but we were very different in those kind of ways.
I hear you.
I wish I could give him. There were times when I wish I could give him what he wanted, needed. Um, but then it wasn't. I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that, and I'm glad that I didn't do that in another kind of way. I'm sad that things didn't work out, necessarily the way that he wanted after his death. The businesses got sold. Maybe if my life had been different, those kind of things wouldn't have happened. So parts of his vision really didn't come to pass, and I do feel bad about that. But I don't know that I could have done anything differently. So, but that's, yeah, that's that.
I wanted to give you the silence you deserve here.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Jacob's walking along the road in the Bible.
Yeah.
He gets into this fight
Mm.
with an angel, and the angel really fucks him up.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He messes with his thigh, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then from there on in, Jacob, he won the fight, but he
Right.
limped.
He's
Have you
limped.
been in a
Yeah.
fight with an angel?
Well, I mean, I think we're always, kind of doing that. I think that it's like, we're in a fight with, and it's interesting because I think in the case of Jacob, we don't know what it is that he is wrestling with. I think the text, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think the text at first describes it as a man, but
Yes,
it's not.
correct. Yes.
It's not a man. It's hard, and the rabbis say, well, it's a man, or it's Esav, or it's Esav's guardian angel, or it's some other kind of angel. Of course, this being that he wrestles with tells him you've wrestled with God and men, and he names him Yisrael, like you wrestled with, you will wrestle with God. Um, so I think, have I wrestled with an angel? I mean, I think that we all wrestle with our, own psychology, our own angels, demons, whatever, our relationships with our fathers, as the case may be, or other people that we are, similarly intimately related, to, or in those kind of relationships with. I think we'll wrestle with what those people represent to us, or our histories with them. And I think that we, as Jews, as you said, being angry with God, I think we wrestle with God in a way that maybe others don't. Perhaps in other monotheistic religions, it's a big no-no to argue with God. In Judaism, some of our great heroes, Abraham, Moses, they question, they throw pretty difficult questions back at God,
Yes, they do.
and so I think, yes. So I mean, I definitely wrestle, whether that's an angel or whatever it is. I don't know, but it's uh, and it's definitely wrestling with our own psychology, probably more than, at least in my experience, more than anything.
Yeah, I tend to think that as well. Do you have scars?
I have scars, you know. Yeah, we all have scars, but I remember that the great uh, um, poet Yehuda Amichai has the great Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai has some kind of line about uh, I'm going to butcher it, but basically it's like, you know, those aren't scars on my heart; they're recommendations.
That's a good one. I've never heard that. That's great. I love that.
You
Recommendation. Yeah, that's perfect.
know? So
Recommendation.
right, you know, so I have scars, you know, I have a line in in a song on my new album, a song called Gasoline, where the song is about a guy that's coming out of prison after a long time, and there's a line there that I wrote that, you know, I count the years by I count the years by you know, by my scars and all I've done to keep them there. So, you know, we have scars, and then some, you know, sometimes whether we're conscious of it or not, we keep those wounds open and maybe don't always let them heal.
Yes.
And the thing that we probably have to do is to try to let them heal and not keep scratching them open. You know, so I'm trying to figure that out.
Are you good at healing?
I don't know. You have to ask me when I get closer to being healed.
Well, I'll be on the line. You know, I think a very good way of the determination of a person's character, at least in one way, is to ask them, who's your favorite biblical character? Way
Mm,
back when we first started talking, I believe you got very excited about Joseph.
yeah, yeah. Joseph is
Why is that, Ethan?
well. you know, Joseph is you know he's a very colorful, complicated character as so many of them are. I think that the you know he starts out as a kind of yeah, maybe, you know, a little bit arrogant of a kid. I don't think I was ever that, but you know, he's like, I'm the greatest. Everybody
Yeah.
loves freedom, and you're all going to bow down to me, and all this. And he definitely gets his comeuppance, right? Believe me, I'm not letting his brothers off the hook. I mean, they do terrible things to him, selling him into slavery, throwing him into a pit, all this kind of stuff. And he has these crazy experiences, you know, of being a slave in Egypt, and then going to prison, and then becoming prime minister, and and yet he is able to, in the end, you know, put his brothers through a test, but he is also able to forgive them for everything that happened. Um, and it's really because of the evolution of his brother Yehuda, Judah, who, you know, was the one that sort of really sold him into slavery. But later on, we hear Judah talking about how he's, you know, Erev with his brother Benjamin. And they all have this moment where they realize, you know, we're all Erev, meaning sort of woven together, right? We're sort of all liminal with each other. And I just think that's a beautiful moment for Joseph and Yehuda, um, when they have this breakthrough about that all of us, you know, here are really woven together in different ways in terms of the relationships we have with each other and our shared humanity. And so Joseph is able at that point to really have his heart opened by that and to forgive his brothers. And with all the terrible experiences he's had, he could definitely be bitter and resentful his whole life. He could have thrown his brothers in prison and have been done with them. He's the prime minister of Egypt, after all. He didn't have to forgive them, right? And yet he's able to have that kind of breakthrough. So I do think Joseph is a real model, um, that we can all hopefully transcend the very worst things that can happen to us in our lives. I mean, imagine being thrown in prison. Holy cow! You know,
Or in a pit with scorpions?
or in a pit with scorpions, right? Yeah, yeah.
Have you had to, in your life, really, really dig deeply to forgive someone that just hurt you so badly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I won't get too specific about people, but I had people in my family that were, when I was young, that were on drugs and abusive, and I had to run away from them. Fortunately, my father, Bill, protected me, and I was able to feel safe, in his home. And but subsequently, those relatives, got themselves clean, did teshuva, and we have a relationship today. I don't see them that much, but it's um, but you have to move on with these kind of things. Otherwise it becomes a very oppressive weight on you that you carry around for the rest of your life. To hate people and to be resentful. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I've done that. That's not to say that I don't deal with my own demons and my own hatreds and my own resentments. I certainly do, but I try to be aware of them and try to channel them into uh, a more positive direction, something that will actually be useful rather than harmful to me and to others.
In conclusion, in a couple of weeks, we will be eulogizing Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, which is interesting because as we study the Parshiot today, the not only do we see a change in Moses' personality from the time that he was standing in front of the burning bush and saying, I'm not a man of words, I'm not a
Yeah.
leader, and then ultimately in Devarim, the final book of the 5 books of Moses, he's standing there for 5 weeks and he's speaking to the Bnei Israel, and it's magnificent, his speech. But finally, when he passes away, and that'll be in a few weeks from now, God eulogizes him and he says, never has there been another
Yeah.
prophet, never will there be another prophet like Moses. His eyes never dimmed.
Right.
And that has stayed with me a lot. And I think about people whom I have known, my father and my mother, God bless their souls, my sister Naomi, who passed away during COVID, as did her husband Benji.
Mm.
And I think about all of them, and Ethan, their eyes never dimmed.
Right.
No matter how
Right.
much they were kicked around, they
Yeah.
were the consummate leaders from day one until their final breath. And I'm
Right.
just wondering about you. You've been very honest in this interview and expressed your life in a very forthright way. And I thank you for that, because honestly, that's what people want. They
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
they want to learn through honesty. They want to learn through authenticity, not so much bullshit that we're putting out there nowadays.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering, in your own estimation, are you standing on the mountain? Have your eyes dimmed, or are
I don't
you
know.
still full of verve and full of life, even after being kicked around?
Oh, I think I'm full of verve and full of life. I mean, I also am conscious of the fact, and I wrote a lyric uh, to this on my upcoming album, which come out next month. Um, I wrote, you know, my heart has been broken in 1,000 different ways. That's why you can't believe anything that I might say. I'm no longer objective the way I was before. I don't even see through the same eyes anymore. And so I am conscious of the fact that I can go into a very cynical and dark place, and that, even if my eyes maybe haven't dimmed, let's say, that there can be times when I look through the world with, sort of askance, with more cynical eyes, maybe than I had when I was younger. And at least I try to be aware of that and try to pull myself out of that space. But yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, you think about Moses, who had to deal with people complaining for 40 years in the desert about everything, right? And
Incessantly.
yeah, and there's moments when he does lose control, right? Um, I mean, can you blame him? I mean, he's got this job that he didn't want, and that everybody seems to hate him. you know,
Everybody, man.
you know,
Everybody. I know.
and and yet his eyes didn't dim, right? And that's remarkable, man. How to find that kind of, because you can imagine. I mean, just the for him every day getting up to go to work, it's like, what are they gonna complain about today? Oh my God. Right?
And he even says to God at some point, he says, "Take me, man. Just take me."
Yeah, just take me back. Just kill me
Yeah,
now, right?
I've had enough.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
But and yet his eyes didn't dim. So, I mean, that should be, we don't have anything as bad as what Moses had to go through with all these people, So it's best to probably keep that in mind, right? The other thing I wanted to say about Moses too, which was interesting, is this only occurred to me, of course I remember my whole life that at the beginning he says, I'm not a man of words. But I went last week and I looked back, okay, what is really the word there? He says, I'm not a man of Devarim
Yes.
at the burning bush. And yet now here we are in Devarim, which is his 5 week long farewell address. So he goes from a person who either is not a man of Devarim, or he at least doesn't perceive himself as a man of Devarim. He believes that's not his talent, or he doesn't have that ability. And yet by the end of his life, he's the quintessential man of Devarim,
Yes.
you know. And that's another pretty remarkable evolution that so
It's really magnificent to watch people change, and we
mm,
don't see it all that much. But
right.
sometimes, you'll grow up with someone and you'll see them after a while and they'll have gone through a metamorphosis of sorts, which
Mm,
is magnificent. And I think
mm,
that's what Moshe Rabbeinu went through.
for sure.
Um, I have such respect for people when they have that courage and bravery to transform, because transformation is certainly one of the hardest things to do.
No question. No question.
Now you know that I've been playing around with AI, and
Mhm.
last time we spoke, I had an ode to Ethan Daniel Davidson. I have another one, and I want to read it to you. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, please do.
In Detroit's heart, where Motown hums, Ethan Daniel Davidson strums. A folk song woven raw and true, with haunting voice and timeless hue. 11 albums, stages vast, from North America to Europe cast. His lyrics confessional paint the air, oil books, oil lamps, a soul laid bare. Bohemian trails he walked alone, from Bloomfield roots to lands unknown. A Michigan sun with a golden tone, he carves his path, no heart of stone. At Lazier High, a band's first spark ignited dreams in music's arc. From Ann Arbor's hall to Harvard's gaze, he chased the muse through winding days. With Gretchen, his love, a slumber party star. 3 children they raised, their dreams afar. A Torah scholar seeking light, his pen confronts the shadowed night. And they arose early. His book's bold claim tackles ancient texts, their truth, their shame. Moses, Miriam, Jacob's kin, through Ethan's lens, their tales begin. Philanthropy flows like a river grace, the William Davidson Foundation face. His father's legacy, a guiding hand. For Detroit's art, he takes a stand. Opera, Motown, DIA's embrace. He builds a future, a cultural space. Treasure's chairman, a steward wise, he lifts the city where his heart lies. From Alaska's wild to the East Coast hum, a baseline pulse where his roots still thrum. A man of balance, conviction strong. Ethan's story is a timeless song. With Torah's wisdom and a troubadour's art, he binds the universal to the human heart.
Oh man. Beautiful.
Amen.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful. Thank
AI.
you.
Ethan, that's
It's pretty
AI.
cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not anything without without the ingredients that you put into it. So,
True.
you know, yeah.
Anyways, I love doing this with you. Thank you.
Sure, man. I love doing it with you too. It's amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
we seem to travel a lot of roads when we schmooze. And I think mostly I just want to thank you very much for being so open and
No,
honest
no, no,
about who
no.
you are. Like, there's no airs about you. You don't have masks. I don't.
Well, I appreciate you having me back on the show, and I'll tell you and your listeners and viewers that by the next time that we get together, I will have officially gotten smicha as a rabbi.
Yeah,
So
really?
that's coming up at the end of the month here in
Oh, you're
Detroit. So
kidding.
yeah, so I'll have smicha. So
How do you feel about that, Rabbi?
well, people have asked me over the because I study at different kollels. I study with all kinds of different people over the years, and people have asked me, if I ever wanted to do that, and I kind of, was, you know, um, neither here nor there with it. I wasn't interested in any kind of title. People. Some people call me rabbi. I've married their children. I've named their babies. I study Torah with them, so I do some rabbi things. And then a friend asked me if a rabbi I study with in Chicago. She asked me if she could give me smicha. So I asked my friend Asher Lopatin, who's a modern Orthodox rabbi whose shul I go to here, and said, should I do it? And so Asher said, you should definitely get smicha. So now I'm getting smicha. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's an honor. I mean, the fact that anybody thinks that I'm good at that is makes me feel good.
What did you have to do to get smicha?
Well, it's just that I've been studying for so long, and this friend, Rabbi Lape in Chicago, um, when she asked me a year ago, if she could give me smicha, I said, well, I can't come to Chicago and go through your program there at your yeshiva and the whole thing. And she said, no, she said, you're already doing rabbi. You just have to tell me if you want smicha. So, um, what I've had to do is, like I said, I've been dedicated to study for years and years. I intend to stay dedicated to that. And I mean, a friend of mine in the yeshivish community told me years ago, like, one way people become rabbis is that the community decides they're a rabbi. They don't actually have smicha. So
That's exactly what happens.
yeah, so
They
so I
they
feel
rise into it. Yes.
yeah, exactly. So I guess that's kind of what happened to me. I don't know.
I heard a story once. I'm not sure if it was Ramosha Feinstein or one of the other great Gedolim. I tend to think it's another great Gadol. And someone asked him, he goes, let me ask you a question. How did you become such a great leader? He said,
Yeah.
somebody asked me a question one day and I answered it and they liked the answer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
It's very organic in
It's
nature, right?
very organic. It's very organic. Yeah, exactly.
So you have a lot going on. You got an album coming out, Muscle Tough on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you had a couple books which have come out. Are you working on a new book?
I'm working on a new book about the blasphemer in Parshas Amor. It's a character that's always fascinated me, and I think it has a lot to say about complicated Jewish identities. Especially in this day and age. And can we make a space for people with complicated identities? Not that they should blaspheme God. I mean, fine, but it's like, how do we make space for people like that?
And you know what fascinates me about that is that the story of the blasphemer is how many psukim? How many lines is it?
Yeah, it's like 5 lines or something.
5
It's
lines.
very,
And
yeah.
here you are writing a book about it. That's the beauty of Torah.
Well, the rabbis have there's a lot of midrashim that can
Yes,
fill in
there
the
are.
blanks. So,
No, but I'm saying you'll often find these little vignettes within the
right.
Torah, right? Like the blasphemer. It's a great example.
Yeah.
Ben Sora Omorer.
Yeah,
And they're just a few lines, but
that's
there's
right.
copious amount of things written about them, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I love that about
Absolutely.
Torah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for listening and for watching. As I said at the top of the show, think about your own life. There's an awful lot of people out there who are struggling to get in the zone or struggling to find their passion. It's not easy for anybody. But what I will say is when you eventually find your zone or pieces of it, as Viktor Frankl said, that's where you find your meaning. That's where you find your purpose. And sometimes what you need to do is you need to take a really, really close look at where you're at, who you are at a given point and say, I need to step out of this, right? I need to go from Ur of Chaldees to Canaan like Abraham did, right? And that
exactly.
takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of bravery. If you can take something out of my interviews with Ethan, not only this one, but the previous one, that's what I take out of it, is that you had the courage, you had the bravery to take a really close look at where you were at and say, yeah, I need to go on the road here. And you
Yeah,
did. So
yeah.
kol hakavod to you. And I think you're a great, great role model for a lot of people who struggle with their
Yeah.
own identity. So nice job, Ethan. Excellent job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Avram. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure being on the show again. Thank you so much.
I love it. And I love you when you walk around, not only because it's so Socratic, it's so interesting. There's motion there. And I think I'm going to start doing that. But I also love seeing your library.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've got a book problem as a lot of Jews have.
Yes, we
So,
do. We do. I'm always surprised. Like I say, do you have a library? No, I don't.
yeah.
Your Judaism is questionable then.
That's right. Yeah. See, you've got quite a healthy book problem too. So
I do.
yeah.
Huge. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. As they say in Yiddish, Zeigazin, which go in good health. I'm Yisrael Chai, proud to be a Jew. Study Torah, man. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting, and you will love it. Ethan, thank you again.
Thank you.